Well, in our highly competitive and noisy world, who must we be in order to stand out, to succeed, to receive unconditional love and approval? We're going to dive into that today and discover all the things we're doing to be loved. And is that actually the best way to live? Joining me to unpack this is clinical psychologist Dr. Mary C. Lin. Thanks so much for joining us.
So happy to be here. I am glad to be with you.
I love it. And this book, Rebecoming, wow, it showed me a few things about myself, which we are not going to unpack here today.
Well, why not?
But let's talk about you.
Okay.
Rebecoming, you actually wrote this book because you discovered that you were living out some behaviors that wasn't really who you were because of the expectations of other people. Tell me about that.
Gosh, yes. It wasn't the book I was even intending to write because of that. I thought I was going to do this book based on my expertise, how I can teach people things. And then God just had a different plan for me. And I wrote it probably during a pretty difficult time in my life from a personal but also ministry standpoint. And in the process of doing that, he started to uncover all the things that behaviors and strategies that I was using to try to gain people's approval, to try to feel loved. And as I was kind of working it through, I started to realize, wait a minute, like living out of who God is calling me to be, like my purpose, can't be because I'm doing all these behaviors just for people to like me.
Yeah.
And so it was very deeply personal, but in a good way, even though it was uncomfortable. The stripping away of the masks and all the counterfeit parts of me to kind of figuring out who I really am, that was quite the challenge. But then it kind of led to me going, wait, I would really love this for other people as well.
Yeah, you are really vulnerable in this book, and I have to give you kudos for that because I know it's not easy to open up your deep inner pain, even with your counselor or yourself as a psychologist, much less everyone who picks up this book. But so much helpful material in here.
Thank you.
Talk to me about your essential self and your shadow self. So these two versions of us that we live out of.
Well, I chose the term essential self because in popular culture, people talk about the true self, and you just be you. And that wasn't what I was looking for. The word essential, it started off thinking about the word nephesh in Hebrew is hard to kind of define into English, but it basically means you are a soul. Not that you have a soul, but you are a soul. And then, when you read in Genesis, when God says, let us make humankind in our image, the word image is like essence of God. So I put together the term essential self to mean our truest self that reflects God's glory, how he designed us to be. And so the essential self was what he created us to be and to live. But life happens, and we experience pain and struggles and wrong messages. We believe wrong things. And out of that, we develop our shadow self. Now, our shadow self isn't, I use the term shadow self instead of false self because it's not, oh, it's so false, just kick it to the curb. The shadow self came into our life to protect us because we were in pain or we went into hiding. So it's more that it's a who we are, but with a little twist because the behaviors on the outside may look the same, but we're doing it for our own needs. Our need for affirmation, our need for acceptance, our insecurities, covering that up, our fears, things like that. So when shadow self shows up, it's being able to go, okay, she's here for a reason. Something's been triggered. Maybe there's some unresolved pain. Maybe there's something that happened in the current situation that just caused me to feel really insecure or shame to come into my life. So being able to understand that helps us to then do better and say, I'm not going to let my shadow self control me. I'm going to have compassion for her, but I'm going to actually try to do better.
So what are some of those ways that we're triggered or that we're trying to protect ourselves because of our history? What are those coping mechanisms?
Well, think about yourself as a little girl growing up, and you're just trying to make your way. And we have experiences, whether at home or in the schoolyard, where we get the message that we're not enough, or we get the message that the if-then. If you are a good girl, then I will love you. If you work hard at school, then you will be a success. And little kids don't know that that's just, adult behavior. So they kind of go, oh, well, then I have to work hard. I have to be a good girl. I have to please everybody. And we develop these kind of thoughts and narratives in our head that we then think we have to continue. And so the challenge is those strategies actually work. It does gain us acceptance, but it works until it doesn't, because we get stuck. We get stuck with sort of like habitual patterns, and then we get these strong reactions that we don't take ownership for, because it's easy to then go, well, it's because you made me angry, or you hurt my feeling, or you did this, as opposed to looking at, wait a minute, this is a pattern of response that I tend to have whenever I feel like I'm less than.
I get defensive.
Yes.
I withdraw.
Yes.
I accuse.
Yes.
All these behaviors.
Oh, gosh, yes.
I really liked what you said about self-criticism, because I was like, I think I might do that, where you're like hard on yourself to motivate yourself, because it does keep you going and it does actually work.
I know.
Right? Like, get out of bed, get out and exercise, get out and, do this. Like, you talk to yourself in a way you would never speak to any other living being.
I know. And that's the challenge, because, well, I think there's a couple of parts in it. Some of it is because growing up, we were corrected. Which naturally you are. Your parents will correct you, but we might take that as criticism, and then we internalize it and develop this inner critic. But the other part of it is almost a protective measure. If I criticize myself first, then other people won't. And so then I try to be as perfect as possible. Like I call myself a social perfectionist, because I want to be like perfect in every interaction I ever go into. And of course, that's impossible.
That's impossible.
Yes. So the criticism seems to work, but it doesn't, because it makes you feel discouraged. It makes you feel less than. All the things that doesn't actually represent God. Like, God does convict us, but he loves us. He believes in us. He encourages us. So if you are able to do that for yourself and see your worth in his eyes, you're actually much more likely to have a growth mindset where you can go, I can do this. This is hard work, but I can do it. Whereas self-criticism makes us feel like, oh, I messed up. I don't even know why I'm bothered trying. Right?
So
and it leads to more
demotivating in the
performance too. And this is the thing, is we keep performing, and we lose sight of our true self when we do that.
There's so much more you unpack in this book, but about how we behave and some of those protective behaviors. But if somebody's even recognizing a few of the things we hit on right now, is it, and you've had a lifetime of this, maybe decades of it, is it possible to start rewriting the stories we're telling ourselves and the way that we're responding and reacting?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the good news. So I wrote this book purposely with a faith background for sure, but also with science and psychology. And so you'll see a lot of science that talks about how we can literally rewire our brain. And not to get all technical and science geeky, because I love science geeking. I need a whole half an hour extra to go science geeky. But what we believe can actually transform our thought patterns. And negative thoughts, for example, will release cortisol and hormones that actually cause us stress. Whereas positive thoughts will release what I call happy hormones. There's more technical terms in that.
I like that.
But happy hormones.
That's good.
So like even just changing how you think about things. But see, like we're often in our own little echo chamber of what we believe. And so one of the things that's super important is to recognize that while I think I have self-insight, research shows only 10 to 15% of us actually have true self-insight.
Wow.
And that's because I have insight about how I feel about things and my thoughts, but I don't have a lot of insight in how other people experience me. So what's it like being on the other side of me? So getting feedback from people, asking people, like, do you notice patterns in how I'm doing this? I had this really strong reaction to that situation. What do you think is going on? So that helps you gain better insight so that you start to break these patterns. And every single time a change behavior, new wiring's happening. And you repeat it enough that you truly do become transformed.
And even as, an accomplished psychologist, you still have to go through that process. So none of us are exempt. And I really loved how you talked about self-compassion, because I do think that very few of us are truly compassionate for ourselves as a child, for ourselves where we are in our lives.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the role of that in our lives.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the word self-compassion, because it starts off with self, is a lot of us as Christians have been taught that anything to do with self must be selfish. But it's not true. Because when you think about how Jesus came and how often he showed compassion to people, and how often, like in the work that I do, if I don't give people compassion and grace, there really is no growth. So if we're not doing that for ourselves, and self-compassion doesn't mean that it's going to be okay, I don't have any issues, I don't have any weaknesses. Self-compassion is actually an honest look at our strengths and weaknesses, but recognizing our humanity, our brokenness, our struggles, our pain points, having compassion for that, and having grace and patience for the journey of growth, which takes our lifetime. It really does.
It really does. And you know, what I love about this book is that you have been through this process and are probably still in it, because you do say in the book, it's really never over. You know, life continues, we continue to get hurt, we continue to fall back into those behaviors. But what is the win? So if people, you know, get a copy of Rebecoming, and you have things that they can do at the end of every chapter that's going to just gently take them along that journey, if they do the work, what's the win?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we talk about living for God and having a sense of purpose, but imagine the freedom to be all that you can be. Like, I like to imagine that we are all vessels of shining God's glory. So if you imagine like a nativity scene, and every one of us is shining God's glory in that personal way that only we can. There's no other Cheryl in the world, ever. And if you're shining your light and I'm shining my light and all of us are doing that, just think about how beautiful the world will be. Whereas if one person is not shining their light, you notice it right away when you see a Christmas scene, for example, right? So it's that freedom to really just feel joy, to feel connected, to feel that you really have a purpose here, to feel valued. There's just so much at stake. And the world literally is counting on us to change the world with being our true selves, with God and the Holy Spirit in us and working through us.
I love so much about what you just said. And I think, you know, there's, first of all, working on yourself is the gift you give to people you say you love, so they're going to be impacted. Then there's your calling and destiny and the ways that we shrink back because we don't believe in ourselves because of this pain. Oh, there's just so many wins. You have to get a copy of Rebecoming by Dr. Mary C. Lin. You are going to love this book, and it's going to set you on a new journey. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and really sharing about your own journey. I know that wasn't easy, but it's a huge gift to all of us.
Thanks for saying that, Cheryl.